Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. Folks, I'm so excited today to be joined by Mr. Gary Hahn, the longtime voice of the NC State Wolfpack since the 1990 to 1991 season. So I believe, Gary, if I'm not mistaken, this is your 30th season. Congratulations.
Yeah, I think it's actually 31, but who's counting? That's when you get that many, you lose track.
For sure. Well, I want to start off with first, how have you been handling this pandemic? I mean, this is something that has impacted our lives both professionally and personally. So how have you been handling this past year?
Well, I've been just doing whatever they tell me to do. It's a totally different world out there now. We don't travel with the team, football or basketball, for any road games. We've done one road game in person. That was at Carolina because they allowed us to be there and we could drive over. Other than that, we've done everything staring at a television screen through some kind of ESPN or ACC network platform and having to call the game that way. In football, I didn't have a normal crew. Usually I'll have a sideline reporter, but they took the sideline guy away. So we brought him into the broadcast, and it was just Johnny Evans, who was the normal analyst, Tony Haynes, and myself. And then we had a producer engineer, and that was it. No spotter, no statistician, no extra support people at all. So that was a little bit hard to get used to. And then in basketball, we just go with our three-man crew with Tony Haynes on analysis, and then David Modlin is our producer engineer. And sometimes during some midweek games, we have John Brockwell produce. So it's been different. It's hard for an old guy to adjust to some of these new things, but I've been able to do it. The only thing that's hard is sometimes you need to see the floor or you need to see the field, and television will be doing some feature on somebody when you really need to tell folks where the ball is or what's going to happen. And so that's kind of been a real tough situation. But I've just learned, don't tell them what you don't know, tell them what you do know. So that's what I've tried to do.
Was definitely a good piece of advice there. Let's go back to more happier times. When did you know you wanted to become a sports broadcaster?
Well, probably in my early teens. Before I was 10 years old, I started listening to the Pittsburgh Pirates on radio. The first 11 years of my life were spent in Western Pennsylvania, and the Pirates were on KDKA, a 50,000 watt clear channel station at 1020, and that was like a local station for us. And we listened to the Pirate games all the time. My family. Um, I loved listening to Bob Prince and Jim Woods, two Hall of Fame announcers. One was a wild man, one was a straight man. And these guys were having so much fun that I thought, man, oh, why? What kind of a job would that be? That'd just be the greatest thing in the world to be able to do something that's that much fun, because all of my relatives worked in factories. They worked at St. Joe Lead, or they were steel workers or something like that. And those jobs weren't that much fun. They were hot jobs, and so I'm not sure I wanted to do that. So that's how I got interested. And then by the time I was about 13 years old, I think I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the next voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates. That didn't actually work out, but I kind of charted my educational path so that I could go somewhere where I could get on the air as a freshman and make mistakes with nobody listening, because I knew that was the way to go, that book learning was part of it, but that wasn't going to get me where I really needed to go. And so I charted a path. I went far away from home. We lived in Western Maryland at the time, and I went to Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana. And they had at that time, they don't anymore, but they had a really good radio and television department. Now it's mostly just television. They kind of dumped radio, but that's kind of where I got my feet wet and started to learn what to do and what not to do. And then I would listen to everybody I could listen to, and try to steal a little bit from this guy and that guy, but not become this guy or that guy, because you've got to be yourself. And that's sort of what I've done.
And you've traveled all over the country, Gary, for your career. I mean, I was looking in New York City, Louisville, Ohio State, Alabama, but I have to wonder, what was it like to start out your career in New York City of all places?
Well, I didn't actually start out there. It took a little while for me to get there. Out of college, I had a tough time getting a job. Um, my second semester of my senior year, Butler had an internship program. And I landed at Channel 13 as an intern. This was WLWI-TV. It was owned by Avco Broadcasting that owned stations in Dayton and Cincinnati. And I'm trying to figure out where else, Indianapolis. Anyway, this was the station where I landed. And I was a news intern, basically. And I learned how to write. During that semester, I learned more about writing from the news director than I had learned through all of my education, through all of my college, through everything. I learned how to write because of this guy named Bill Dean, who was an eyewitness news type news director. And I think he was from Philadelphia. And you did something, he jumped your case. I mean, he didn't give you any breaks, but he made you better. And he finally started to send me out on some stories. And so I kind of grew that way. But then when my internship was over, I really didn't have anywhere else to go. But fortunately, there was a man working at WLWI TV by the name of David Letterman. And he did weekend weather, and he had this kind of weird show called Freeze Dried Movies, where they would take these awful movies and he would come in during the breaks and do comedy routines. And he developed a real big cult following with Freeze Dried Movies. But his basic job was to do the weekend weather and then be a booth announcer. This was a union shop. And so he would be in this booth, and people had been smoking in there for 20 years. It was all brown stained, and it had an old DX77 RCA mic there. And he would just sit there and write comedy material. And then once every half hour, he'd have to turn on the mic and he'd say something like, "Sale on Saturday at Sears." And then he wouldn't say anything until the top of the hour when he'd do the ID, or he'd say something else. And every once in a while, they'd have a live read for him to do with some slides or something. And he left and went over to a radio station in Indianapolis, way at the end of the dial. And they gave him free reign. He could do anything he wanted to. And so some of the people that had been watching Freeze Dried Movies learned that he was at this radio station, and now he was doing a talk format. And he was doing comedy material and doing a talk show at the same time. He was hilarious. But there was an opening for this booth announcer job. Well, I didn't have anywhere to go, nothing. I had no prospects. And so I applied for it, and they thought, well, you've been a good intern. You got a good voice. Hang on, we'll make you the booth announcer. So that was great. All I did was I went into this booth and I was there, and I did the breaks and I did all of that kind of stuff. And I really wasn't doing anything more, but it was good money. And that lasted for almost a year. And then management changed. And this guy came in, this Avco broadcasting executive, and he looked at what was going on, and he pretty much brought me into his office, and he said, you're going to have to do weekend weather, because I can't afford to just have somebody sitting in that booth. And I'm going to give you an audition to do the weather. And if you pass, you got the job. If I don't like you, you're out of here. Well, my audition apparently didn't go too good with him, because he fired me. And I didn't really know where to go, but I had some connections with some people that I went to school with at Butler. And one of them was at a local radio station, the country station, WIRE. And his name was Gary Hahn. And he found out what was going on with me. And at that time, somebody else had moved on, and they needed somebody to come in and kind of be a jack of all trades and master of none, fill in for people that went on vacation, do the community service reports, to fill in on sports when Don Fisher was doing Indiana games on the road. So I jumped at it, and I was unemployed for about 3 days, fortunately, and didn't even have time to file for unemployment. I went to WIRE in Indianapolis, and I worked there for, from about 1975 through about 77. And I really wanted to get a full-time sports job. While I was at Wire, I worked during the day, and then at night, I would get piecemeal play-by-play jobs. There was a little station in Plainfield, Indiana. Appropriately, the call letters were WART. It was well named, but they did a lot of sports, and I got to do a lot of games. I think I did like 81 broadcasts one year of girls basketball, boys basketball, 2 high school football teams, selected Butler University road games that they somehow paid, for the rights, and I could do those. And so I started to get a demo reel going of my play-by-play skills. And that's where I really developed as a play-by-play announcer. If you can do a high school football game, you can do the Super Bowl. I mean it. If you can do a high school football game and do it well, you can do the Super Bowl, because in high school, you got to get all your material yourself. You don't have anybody giving you one of these men's basketball releases from the Atlantic Coast Conference that give you more than you never want to know, or the releases from the schools like Virginia Tech or State. Getting ready for a game now is a lot easier than it was back then. So I did that, but I wanted to do sports full time, and an opening came up in Louisville, Kentucky at WAVE Radio 970. And I applied for it, and the Lord opened up some doors for me to go there, and I went there and worked from, 1977 through 81. The station was being sold. They said, Gary, you've been a great employee. Normally we just show you the door, but because we like you so much, we're going to give you 2 months to look for another job. So I was pedaling hard. I didn't know where I was going to end up, but I covered the Kentucky Derby, and this was an NBC affiliate, and they were looking for somebody. I didn't know it, but they sent a guy down to help me. And I thought that was a little bit strange that he was going to help me. Basically what he did, he came down and watched me work for a week. He was just a scout, but I didn't know it. So fortunately, I handled him very well, and I did very well. And at the end of the week, he asked me if I wanted to come to New York and work at NBC. Well, the only problem with that was I had a job that I was really gunning for, and it was, I forget where the job was, but it was all play-by-play. And that's what the job I really wanted. So I asked him if he could just hold off a couple of days. Well, the other job didn't work out. They got somebody else. So I thought, well, this is, it's not what I want to do, but it's not bad when you get to go to New York City and work at the national network. So I did that. I was an anchor there, and was on anchored the weekend sportscast, and then I was a reporter during the week. So that's how I got to NBC. And then from there, I went to Ohio State because I wanted play-by-play full time, and the Lord opened up some doors for me to go there. I worked there from I think it was 84 through 86, and then I went to well, due to family considerations, I made a bad mistake. I left Ohio State, which was the job basically that I had been training for all my life, and went to Huntsville, Alabama, because of some family issues, and worked at a little small radio station there, basically being the news director until something at Alabama opened up. And then I was able to go there and work with Eli Gold and kind of be his number 2 man. And from there, the job opened up at NC State, and the Lord opened up some incredible doors for me to go there, really incredible doors. And I've been there for 31 years. So that's the long story. I guess this is a long form interview. I hope it is, but there you have it.
That's awesome. And I was wondering, Gary, what are some of your favorite memories covering the NC State Wolfpack?
Oh man, there's a bunch of them. Beating Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl with Phillip Rivers as the quarterback. That would be a big one. NC State getting into the Sweet 16 for the first time and knocking off UConn when Herb Sendek was the coach. That was big. There have been a lot of really nice memories, and some people think I'm crazy, but there is a memory of one of the best football games I ever called. It was an NC State Duke game. It was like 1991, and it was going back and forth. It was a high-scoring game, and State scored to go ahead. I think it was 35-31 or something like that, and there was only about 16 seconds left on the clock, but State had to kick off to Duke. Well, State kicks off the Duke, and this kid, I still remember his name, Brad Breedlove. He grabs the kickoff, and he starts moving upfield. He's making people miss all over the place. He's going from one side of the field to the other side of the field. The clock is ticking down. Finally, he beats everybody but the kicker. And the kicker is, I'm a little guy. I'm about 5'7", 153 pounds. Well, that's about the size the kicker was. But fortunately, he had an angle on Breedlove, and Breedlove couldn't escape that angle, and he chucked him out of bounds as there was no more time left on the clock at about the state 14-yard line, something like that, and the game was over. And I'll always remember that game because it basically went. It was a great game because it went right down to the last second.
And you mentioned Philip Rivers. He just retired this past offseason. I mean, you got to watch him during his days at NC State. I mean, what are some of your favorite memories covering Philip Rivers, and how do you put into perspective his Hall of Fame NFL career?
Well, some of the things I remember about Philip Rivers was he was not recruited by the big SEC schools to play quarterback. Now you figure these guys are supposed to be football geniuses. You know, they wanted him to be a defensive player, like a safety or a linebacker or something like that. But he wanted to play quarterback really bad. And State needed a quarterback. I mean, we had absolutely nobody in the chain that was going to, that was ready and could do really anything. And so Mike O'Kane was the quarterback or the coach, and he recruited Philip Rivers. Well, O'Kane got fired, but they left one person on the staff. I think it was Joe Pate to recruit. And so Joe was able to get Philip Rivers to come in because they had been recruiting him, and because Philip knew he was going to play right away. He was going to start. We had nobody left. And so he comes in, and the rest is history. And the thing about Philip Rivers was that when he was a freshman, he acted like a junior. He'd have a press conference or whatever, and he'd be talking like somebody that'd been in the program 3 or 4 years. I mean, he was just so mature, and he could tell you stuff and not give you a whole lot at the same time, but make you think he was giving you a lot. I mean, that's how smart this kid was. And then at practice, I used to go to practice. He knew everything about the offense better than the coaches did. I can remember one time I'm sitting up there just watching, which you could do back then. And I think it was, who was the assistant coach? Doc Holliday. He was calling in plays, and he signals in this one thing, with all these signals. And Philip goes, he said, Doc says, yeah, that's better. Let's run that. I mean, that's just, you knew he was special. I mean, and he would always, they always said, well, he's got a funny throwing motion and all this stuff. Well, who cares? He got the ball to whoever he was supposed to get it to, when he was supposed to get it to him. Didn't throw a lot of interceptions. He had a great brain as a quarterback. I mean, I told people his last home game, I said, you better enjoy watching this guy one more time, because you're not going to see the likes of him for the rest of your life. And
That's
so
awesome.
So far, that's been true, although we did have Russell Wilson, but even he wasn't Philip Rivers.
That's awesome for sure. And Gary, I was wondering, how do you prepare for a game? I mean, let's say you have a football game, Virginia Tech, NC State. What's your preparation like the week leading up to the game to be sure you're ready to go?
Well, you start to get ready on Monday. Usually the coach has a news conference, and you'll get releases, and you'll ask questions, and you'll start to get some idea of what's going on that week. And then because Coach Dorn gives us permission, we can go to any practice that we want to. Now this year, because of COVID, that got kiboshed for the most part. But having that kind of access helps you a lot. I mean, you can tell if there's somebody hurt. Of course, you don't go blabbing it or whatever. You keep all this stuff to yourself if you want to come back to practice. And so, the coaches can trust you. They know they can trust you, and you're getting the pertinent information that you need. And then you start to work on a spot chart. Hang on a second. I'm going to grab one. This one was for the bowl game with Kentucky. And what you're going to see, it folds in half. In fact, I've still got junk in it, because I didn't know you were going to ask me this question, or I'd have been ready. But what you can see, or maybe not see, do I have it up right? You'll have the Kentucky offense on one side and the NC State defense on the other side. And this is a program that I had a student compile on Excel. And this is what I do with my spot chart. Obviously, up here, you've got the offensive line, Then you got, I think, let's see, where the wide, yeah, tight ends over here, wide receivers here. Then you've got quarterback, running backs. I don't know whether you can see that up there or not.
Yep.
But, and then on the defense, you've got all the positions over there. And for each one of these, you'll have his name, his number, his class, his height, his weight, where he's from. Um, I don't usually put where they're from, the visitors, except a quarterback or maybe a Heisman Trophy candidate or something like that. And then the rest of it, I don't know whether you can see here, there are little things you can throw in during the game. You've got the schedule over here. You've got little things under each one of these players that you can throw in. Basically, during a broadcast, you don't want to force this stuff in. You want it to come naturally. And you'll use maybe 1/4 of it and you throw 3/4 of it right in the trash can when you're done. But you don't know what quarter you're going to use, what 1/4 of it you're going to use. So that's how I prepare. And of course, I got my own system here. The players that are in dark are going to touch the ball. Those guys aren't. These guys are the starter. The ones in black on defense are the starters. I don't know whether you can see that or not.
Yep.
But and you can move them around that way. That way you don't have to, from week to week, if you're in a hurry, you can just move them down. You can do whatever you want to. And you start to do that. Then after you've got that done, you start to think about what you want to ask the coach in pregame. I got a pregame segment to do with him. And obviously you got one shot at it. It's like doing it live, but you're on tape. And you don't want to bumble that up. So you try to get your thoughts together. And I usually put some notes down in case I go brain dead. Because I don't care whether he knows that I'm looking at some notes or not. It's what's coming out of that radio speaker. That's all that counts. That's all that's ever counted for me. I don't care what other people think. I don't care whatever. It's what comes out of that radio speaker. That's the only thing that I really, truly care about. And I care about that the most. And so you do whatever you got to do your job. To prepare for pregame, I usually do the first 10 minutes of pregame with Johnny and Tony. I'll script a little bit of that out just to get rolling, because you don't want to get off to a poor start in a broadcast. You do that, sometimes you can't recover. And so I learned that a long time ago doing high school stuff. You just don't show up and start talking and think you can remember everything that you want to think about. Put some lines down there, put some points down there that you want to cover. Do your preparation. Know your opponent. Know the setup of the game. Why is the game important? All of that sort of stuff's got to go into that first 10 minutes when you're talking to the other two guys. And then after you've done that, you sit down for the next couple of days and you'll take maybe the last 3 games that your opponent has played. I get the guys over at the video department at football to give me the last 3 opponents' games on television. I'll just watch the television part of it because I can not only see what's going on, I don't need the coaches, angles and all that stuff. I'm not interested in that. I can pick up sometimes some things from the TV announcers. I can obviously pick up the trends, who's hot, who's not, all that kind of stuff. And so you start to learn who these guys are. Then the last part of it, as you're watching these games, you're starting to memorize numbers. Because for a football game, you got to memorize, well, you pretty much know your team, but you got to memorize everybody that could touch the ball on the other team. And that means a backup defensive back. He comes in the game, makes an interception. You got to be pretty quick about it, or it's going to get away from you and it's going to sound bad. So I start memorizing names and numbers. And the night before that, then I start doing it like on a Thursday night. And then on Friday night, I'll memorize them and I'll go to sleep. And then I'll get up the next morning and I'll start on it with my eyes closed, not looking at this, and see how many I can recall. And that's worked for me pretty good. I've got, Lord's blessed me with a good short-term memory. Long-term, when you ask me some of the things that I remember about some of these games, a lot of the games I don't even remember being there. Because for me, it's all about knowing who's playing and to have recall and then flush it and then load up again, flush it, load up again, flush it, load up again, flush it, load up again. If you asked me what the score was of a state game a month earlier, I probably wouldn't even be able to tell you because it's gone. I mean, I don't, who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is what comes out of that radio speaker and how can I make that the best I can possibly make it.
For sure. And I was wondering,
From that
Gary,
day.
what are some of your favorite football stadiums or basketball stadiums to travel to? And as a Virginia Tech fan, I was curious, where does Lane Stadium, Castle Coliseum rank in that discussion?
Well, I like Castle Coliseum because you're on the floor. It's got high energy. No matter whether Virginia Tech is good or not, the students are going to show up. They're going to make noise. Places like an old airplane hangar, so that the sound is just bouncing off the roof and off of everything, and it's loud. I like that. Lane Stadium. Let's see. I think I had prostate cancer and had to have surgery and missed a game up there in 2009, and we haven't been up there that many times. I've maybe called 2 games, I think, in the new Lane Stadium. I called a couple before then in the old one. In fact, I got a record nobody will ever break at NC State. I called the last tie football game ever played by the Wolfpack, and it was against Virginia Tech in, what was it, 1993 or something. We kicked a field goal on the last play of the game to tie. So that'll never happen. I like the old Lane Stadium. I thought that was good, and I like the new one too. But Georgia Tech's great. Georgia Tech's my favorite because you don't need field glasses. You're there, and unless you want to take field glasses, I mean, you're so close to the action, and the place just reeks with all this history. Of John Heisman and Bobby Dodd, and it's right downtown Atlanta. And I love Georgia Tech. That's probably my favorite place. I like Carter Finley Stadium. You're up pretty high, but it's a good view. I like going to Wake Forest. I think that's a good view. There are very few places that I don't like. I didn't like the old Duke press box because you couldn't open the windows. I'm not real big on Florida State because you can't open the windows. You just got a couple of vents that you can stick a mic out of. I'm not real big on, but that's not a bad place either. Trying to think. I don't think there's any place that I really dislike as far as calling football games in the ACC.
For sure. And Gary, I mean, you've been in this business for a long time. I mean, you've been able to work yourself up to this point. What's your advice to aspiring broadcasters who are trying to make it during this pandemic? I mean, it's already a competitive business. We've got to deal with the realities of coronavirus setting in. You've talked about how it's impacted your work. So what's your advice to young guys and girls coming up like me who are trying to make it in a tough business with the pandemic looming?
You got to learn how to compete because it's a tough business. And you've got a lot of times you've got to start off very small at a WART or work 2 jobs or whatever you've got to do. When I was calling those games as a part-timer, after I left, my regular job at WIRE, I got $12.50 a game. It was supposed to be $25, but I had to give $12.50 to the color guy that they foisted on me, who was, an older guy who was well loved in the community. He really didn't add much of the broadcast, but he was a nice guy, but he got the other $12.50. So that $12.50 went for a couple of McDonald's hamburgers and gas in my 1969 Pontiac. So I didn't make anything doing that, but I wouldn't trade that experience for anything because that's where I learned how to do 3 games a week. I learned how to prepare. I learned how to, I developed a style on the air. And you got to be able to want to do that. You've got to want to have a passion for it so bad that you'll do anything legal to get where you want to get without stepping on people, without hurting people, without cheating. But you have to have a passion to want to do it. And you want to, it's of course, there's got to be some balance there, obviously. But from a professional standpoint, that has to be your goal, and you've got to want it worse than anything. And so that is the advice that I would give. I think a lot of young people your age now think that their first job ought to be at NBC or it ought to be like Bob Costas. Well, he got a job at KMOX right out of Syracuse because he was dating the general manager's daughter. That was part of it. Obviously, he was talented, but how many guys get that kind of a break? I mean, you just don't. Now, some people can fall into those things, and then I got to give him credit. He didn't stub his toe. He was good, and he kept getting better, and he got all the way up to the point now where everybody knows who he is. He's worked Olympics and all of that stuff. But those kind of breaks like that don't happen often, even to the talented people, even to the most talented. And so you got to learn how to compete. You've got to be able to work hard. You've got to be able to get along with people, and you got to be able to take it when things don't go your way. And that's the toughest thing to do, I think, of all of them, is to be able to take it when things don't go your way. I needed a job pretty bad one time. And I mean, I was pretty desperate for a job, and I thought I was going to be the voice of the Ole Miss Rebels, and I didn't make it. And that was tough. I finished second to become the voice of the Detroit Pistons back in the early '80s. That was tough. You've got to be able to, and the way I always looked at it was, I cried after I didn't get the Pistons job. I hate to admit that, but I was kind of young and dumb. But anyway, that broke me up because I thought I was going to get it. I mean, I was getting all these good vibes and all this kind of stuff, and somebody in there and aced me out. But I always looked at it as, man, I was that close. If I just keep swinging the hammer, the rock's going to break eventually. And I just kept trying to swing the hammer. And so that's the advice that I would give all you younger people who are going to be the next set of broadcasters out there. That's what I would tell you.
My final question for you, Gary. You've been so gracious with your time. It's been so awesome getting to hear all the insights on your career. As you reflect on your career, I mean, and you've done so much. I mean, worked at different colleges, you've worked at radio stations, and now with the reputable school like the Wolfpack. Is there anything that you wish you could have done? You say, oh, maybe I wish I could have done this event or worked in this capacity. Or all being said, you're pretty content with how your career has played out.
Oh, I'm satisfied. I mean, I wish I could have been the voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates, but that didn't work out. I never got to do Major League Baseball, but I got to do college baseball. I was with the NC State when they went to the College World Series, and when was that? About 2016 or something like that. I can't even remember the year it was, with Carlos Rodon and that crew. So I've had a lot of wonderful experiences through broadcasting. I've got to go to a lot of places I never thought I would go. Back in the early '90s, we did one season of the World League of American Football, and I got to go to Germany. I got to go to Frankfurt, Germany, and London, England, two places I probably never would have had the opportunity to go just because of that. I think I've been to Hawaii 4 or 5 times. I mean, just because of college athletics, either Louisville or NC State. And so I don't have any real regrets. I mean, sometimes I think I've regretted spending too much time preparing. When I look back on it now, I think I've prepared all of that stuff and I only got to use 1/4 of it. Maybe I should have relied on, the talent that God gave me. But I would rather be over prepared and sitting there. I can remember going to an ACC tournament one time, and this was when we had to do at least 8 games of the tournament, 4 on one day. So I would call 4 games of the ACC tournament in one day. And to get ready for that is a monumental task. You've got to have everything in every scenario already made with your, I'll show you this is the basketball score sheet that I use. And I still keep my own score. And that's because I had to do it doing high school ball, because I had to do a recap show. And they're not going to come up and give you their final stats. I mean, there's no such thing in college or in the high school basketball, So you got to know who the high scorer was, what the final score was. And that's another thing. Always write the final score down as soon as the clock goes to 0, because like over in Chapel Hill, if we beat them, they wipe that stuff right off as quick as they can. So, but that's another thing. But I'm trying to remember what I was saying here. we used to do these 8 games in 4 days, sometimes 9 games in 4 days. And so you've got to learn how to prepare, but you've got to have a happy medium with it too. I mean, God's obviously given you some talent and a desire to do what you want to do. And sometimes you just have to rely on that talent. But if you're not prepared, it'll show up. Your sins will find you out. I mean, that's exactly what it will be. I would rather be over prepared. I can remember going to one of these tournaments and I sat down for the first game and I thought, it just gave me so much confidence. I'm sitting next to Carolina. I'm sitting next to such and such. And I started thinking to myself, I'm the most prepared person in this room right now. And I'm going to give these people a better broadcast than any of these other people can even think about doing. And that's what I did. And it was all because I was completely prepared, completely ready, completely calm. I wasn't, scribbling stuff at the last minute and wondering if I was going to get something done. Then all of a sudden, hi, everybody, we're at Greensboro Coliseum or whatever, I didn't have that. I was ready to go. And when you get to that point, that's when you know that you're prepared and you're ready and you can do your best.
Gary, this has been such a pleasure just getting to hear about your career and all the great stories you have, talking about David Letterman and Philip Rivers and so much more. Can't tell you how much I appreciate my conversation today with you. I really enjoyed it.
Billy, thank you very much. And best of luck to you. Say hi to one of your professors, Mr. Roth, for me.
For sure, I'll do just that. Well, thank you again to Mr. Gary Hahn, the longtime voice of the NC State Wolfpack, for joining me today. This has been the latest edition of The Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. Thanks again, folks, and we'll see you next time.